When you're building the team, all those components have to play a part. One, who are the right people for you, the leader? And many times it's not the person we like the best in the interview. It's actually the opposite. It's the person that we have nothing in common with in that interview, because they're going to bring something new to how things are going to be done, which will complement instead of overpower, right? So in some of the ways in which you build that team chemistry, a leader should focus on themselves first and know what they need, and then watch how the team works together. And back to your high resumes of success, talented people have to learn how to work with other talented people. We tend to become very good sole contributors of our function, but in a leadership team, whenever a leader is putting together a team that they're going to have some sort of management over, it's about unity, not independence. And that's where sometimes it gets lost. So I call that team chemistry.
Today, our conversation is going to be all about that noise that gets in our head. And to make it simple, we're going to refer to that noise as head trash. Now, I didn't come up with the term head trash. Actually, that term is the name of a book series written by our guest today, Tish Squillaro. Tish is the CEO of CANDOR, which is a consulting firm that works with senior teams and leaders to help them make better decisions. And what Tish learned over the years was there were 7 key emotions that kind of got in our way to making good decisions for all those senior teams. But those also get in the way for us as professionals and even us as parents. So I want you to listen real close to our show today as Tish hits those 7 items and ways to overcome those. She's got a great resource and index that you can also get free access to that can help you identify what are the 2 big ones for you. So listen real close. And of course, at the end, I've got a full couple of pages of notes that we'll review.
Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. Bringing a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development, the Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
Well, Tish, I am so excited about our conversation today. I'm so excited about the topic because I know even for me, I get noise in my head. I get stuff that blocks me from being able to take the actions I need to take. And I love the way that you think about it, where you kind of label it very simply put, head trash. So I love the fact that our show today, we're going to talk a lot about head trash and how we can identify that and move past it. But before we jump into that, for my audience, share a little bit about your background. What got you into this journey? And then we can start to move down this path of all the noise in our head.
Excellent. Well, Brandon, thank you for having me. I'm also excited because, head trash is something that's relevant to me, as well as probably all your listeners. And I do think that makes us human, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. My personal background, I've done what I've done for the last 22 years. So I love working with people, all leaders of every level. I focus on their growth and development as an individual. I focus on their ability to make good and smart decisions as a business leader. And somehow it trickles into their personal life and how they can be just good people and inspire others to do well. And Head Trash, actually, the book, or it's a book series, actually, there's 2. The first is really to help people identify emotions that allow them to not be always on their best behavior. And the other is to figure out, how do I engage with others who have it? But we'll focus on the most important, which is, let's think about us first, so self-awareness. And the 7 emotions that I cover in Head Trash are going to be the ones that you will hear every day, all the time, with everything you do. They're very common, which is why they're sneaky. And I think that they cause some pain. And as a mom of 2, I have 2 teenagers. As a mom, I think all 7. So they are control, which as a mom, I use often. Insecurity, arrogance, which my husband says I sometimes have. Paranoia, anger, which as a mom and as a wife, how you not have anger, right? Fear and guilt. Those are the 7. So control, insecurity, arrogance, paranoia, anger, fear, and guilt. We have all those. right? And I think, I'm no book writer. I'm not even a great reader. As my husband would say, you never read. How did you write a book? It's just that I had such a desire to get people comfortable with, it's okay to be human and have your emotions, but just don't make them manage you. And with all of the work that I do with leaders, the areas that I found they needed the most help from someone like me, which is that neutral voice, to obviously show them what emotion was getting in the way, because you're so caught up in what's happening, you don't realize. And these 7 typically have been one of the culprits. I call them culprits that got someone stuck from making a good decision. But I didn't come up with the title right away. It was emotion stuff. How are these 7 emotions getting in the way? How are they hurting your decision making? And I was working with a colleague and he said to me, it's all that head trash. I said, oh my God, I love that word. This is it. Well, funny enough, I co-authored the book with this person. His name is Tim Thomas. And he says, well, what do you know about writing a book? I said, nothing. But you know what? We're going to do it anyway. And so he and I mastered the ability to create this book series called HeadTrash. And it is on these 7 emotions. And they are, as you heard, everyday emotions that we know we want to have them, right? Because they're healthy. I mean, what would I be like if I didn't have control? I need some boundaries of control, right? What would I be if I wasn't a little arrogant? I need confidence to go in and consult with leaders to help them. So there are elements of it that are very healthy to instill in how you think. But when all of a sudden control forces me to be the only person making decisions and everything has to run through me, and I don't allow other people to know everything that I'm doing, I know just pieces. Well, now I'm controlling, and controlling is different than control. So what the book helps you uncover is that what I call the crossing of the line. It goes from healthy to unhealthy. I want you to know what's the difference between good guilt and when is guilt a problem. So being an Italian Catholic, guilt was a family member at our table, right? My mom and dad always had an extra person and we called it guilt. And we called it Uncle Bob, but it really was just guilt because we were always told to do things because your mother would want that, or you should do this because I birthed you. We heard all these reasons why you should do stuff. But the truth is, those were good things to be doing. And what made me actually conform to do those things that I still till today write thank you notes handwritten whenever someone sends something or does something nice. And my children, 2 teenagers that I actually force to do it, but they'll do it. It'll be a week later than I want. Is that control
coming out, Tish? Is that
it's maybe guilt? It's my guilt of saying, listen, you need to do this. If you would like them to do more nice things for you, you should recognize. But there is an element of always something positive from it. But what would be wrong if I force someone to make decisions out of guilt, like do this because I gave you that. And so in businesses, many times it's hard to witness right away, but sometimes we have people in certain roles that shouldn't be. And we do it out of guilt because we were best friends and we started some business together. And now that we're a multi-billion-dollar company, you're still in the same role that you shouldn't have done 10 years ago, but you're still there. That's where guilt sometimes forces you to not face decision-making or have the tough conversation. So that's what the book uncovers, both a professional and a personal side to how these 7 emotions, when healthy, we can make it all the reasons why we want to keep them. But when they cross the line and they get unhealthy, well, they're actually forcing us to not think clearly, right? That's why I call it junk. They're stuck in our head so that the voices only we hear. So there's no way to get help if we can't clear it ourselves. And so the book will walk you through how to manage some of these elements that aren't so easy.
I love that. I love that not only are those 7 laid out, but that each one is really on a kind of a spectrum and there's healthy elements to each. I think that's really helpful that there's all of them have strengths, but if we overplay it or gets involved in our decision-making or overrules our decision-making, that becomes a major issue. So I want to go through each of these in turn, but before we do that, here's a broader question for you, Tish. Do you see one of these as more of a problem today than any of the others? Is there one of these that you say, you know what, if we really got to tackle one, this is the one that I'm seeing from all the leaders and senior teams I'm working with. This tends to be a problem.
That's a great question. And I would say equally, as my company works with leaders of all levels, all companies, and I've been doing this for 22 years, and I called it candor for a reason. I'm very upfront, I'm very direct, And I do believe that's what my clients like about me, that I'm going to be their uncomfortable conscience. But I'm just trying to think through out of the 7, if you want to think about in today's environment, I think insecurity.
Oh,
And I do think it's always been a problem. So I don't want to say that now more than ever, but I do think because of social media and because of the element of knowing so much that may not be real, and it's too much information. And I'll use my teenagers as an example because I'm not on heavy social media other than from a business element for my business, but I'm not on Facebook and some of the others to the same diligence of that. If I had a beautiful meal, I have to let everyone know that I had the beautiful meal. I don't live that way, but our children do. And at least my teenagers, kind of your popularity, your ability to know if you're in the right crowd, what you're missing is these snapshots of things. Yeah. And I don't know if that builds confidence. So what is the healthiness of insecurity is being able to always want to perfect yourself, right? So that's the healthy. I am not perfect. I should always know that I'm vulnerable. And I think one of the greatest elements of leadership is to be vulnerable, to know what am I not great at and how do I get better at it? And so that's the healthy element of what I would call insecurity, is to have you look at yourself and recognize I'm not perfect. But when those voices in your head are creating doubt and low self-esteem and the inabilities of things that you could do better because someone else does it better, so that comparison factor, well, now you're making decisions that are probably not clear and used by facts, but your emotions. And so I have stories of different situations where someone quit their job after a promotion because they didn't think they were capable, and someone was going to find out that they were an imposter and they really didn't know what they were doing. Or people who are not comfortable hiring A players because I'd lose my job if I hired people smarter than me. So let me hire mediocre so that I could always look good, right? So there are so many ways that I've watched insecurity creep into, from the healthy to the unhealthy, in business decision making. And then there's the personal decision making. When you're in relationships that are not right for you, when you're in friend groups that are not actually healthy for you, but you do it for reasons that you think you can't find other friends, or no one's going to like you if you left this group. I've lived it all with a boy and a girl, 17 and 18, all boys school, all girls school. I've probably seen it all. And I've been a class parent, so I've also seen the parents of all of this. There's a lot of things that you learn through observing. And I think insecurity right now, because of the pandemic, because of the amount of intellect around social media, some of it very good. I think I love people can be in touch in the moment instantly, but I also question whether everything we're posting is real, right? So I do think right now, if I were to pick out of the 7, I would say us as a country and a civilization and a society should learn to have some self-confidence in ourselves so that we could not feel like we have to have a voice, even though what we're saying doesn't make sense, right? There are certain things you hear people say and you question, did they really say that out loud? So I do think that would be the one I'd pick.
Okay. So just if we stay on that for a minute, how do we solve for that, or fix that, or address that, or manage that?
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably one of the hardest, because if it's your voice saying you can't do that, they should know that you don't know how to do that. Oh my God, you can't lead that group. That who are you going to have as a friend? It's that voice. You have to be able to first get comfortable with what you're good at. Let's stop jotting down all the things we're not good at, or all the things that we don't feel comfortable doing. Maybe let's gain some footing around the things that we do well. And as an old school person, I love writing stuff. I do believe that writing is an art that we're losing. I write my stuff down. So I always tell people, make a list. I want you to put first all the things that you're proud of and you're good at. And I want you to read that list and get comfortable with it. Then I want you to highlight a couple of things you'd like to do better. And then I want you to write a list of things that you don't do well at all. I'll kind of break it down a little bit. And then I want us to focus on the things we do well first. Let's gain some confidence that there are things you really, really do well. And I do think we lose sight of that, because we're taught to always reform and reflect on the things that we want to get better at. But I'm not sure we spend enough time celebrating the things that we are good at. So that would be one element, is really jot down for yourself What are you actually proud of that you've accomplished? What are things that you do really well? What do people count on you for? It should start to gain awareness of those qualities that are actually positive, because we've got to get the negative things out. And that would be one of the things. The second is stop comparing yourself. I do think that we like to compare, and comparing could be wealth. It could be look and feel. It could be where we think we should be in our career. When you start to compare, I'm not even sure what your metrics are. So I always like to start with, again, if you had that list that you built on what you're proud of, what you're happy is, what do you want to accomplish first as a person, as an individual, and then worry about what everyone else is doing, right? So stop comparing and wishing you could be like Mary or Bob, or how come I'm not on that trip when, stop looking at what everybody else is doing. Because what I've learned in my 55 years is it's not what it seems. Nothing is exactly what it seems. And if you peeled back and learned more about it, you'd find out that, you know what, it's not exactly how it's positioned. So get comfortable with not comparing. Go with your own goals and try to meet them.
Yeah.
And the last is to just learn to accept positive feedback. And you think that sounds simple, but I can't tell you how many people have really no skill in just saying, thank you. I really like that you like that presentation, or you really think this looks nice on me. Thank you. People instead have to come back with a retaliation of, oh my God, it's my worst outfit. I've had it for 50, and I don't like wearing this. This color's not even good on me. Or, oh, that presentation, I thought I was too fast. Do you think I was too? And they talk themselves out of all the things that weren't good. Learn to just say, thank you. I really appreciate that comment. And dwell on that for a minute. Because guess what? They meant it to make you feel good. What you took from feeling good is you created more negativity. So those would be 3 steps that I think could be very helpful. 1, create that list. B, stop comparing, and learn how to accept a compliment.
Tish, I love those. And you know what I love about those too is those apply absolutely to us as individual people in our career, but you could apply those 3 steps to a senior team.
Absolutely.
Because I've seen cases where, a team starts off, they've got a great culture and they say, we love to hire like misfit toys around here, and they start to get successful. The company grows and all of a sudden they say, oh no, we need to hire the people that have the best resumes, that have all the big brands on the resume, because we really don't know what we're doing. And they worked at Apple, so they must know what they're doing, or they worked at Starbucks and they must know. And, and then there's that insecurity starts to creep in, and they start to think that they're not enough. And then they lose the magic sauce. The thing that got them so good in the first place, they lose it because now they're trying to just be like everybody else. I have seen that before. It's unfortunate.
The other thing too is you mentioned teams. And one of the things I focus on with leaders is building team chemistry. And what does team chemistry look like? Well, team chemistry is understanding how a group of people actually complement each other and not overshadow each other. And it does change team by team. So it's unique to you and your team, which means you can build it and create it, which is very exciting because you actually get to control, if you have a little bit of control, a good way of controlling how you build team chemistry. But it's also evolving. And so sometimes the best resume doesn't fit the team chemistry of the team. Yeah. So many of the leaders I've actually worked with had to undo some of the teams they built because they built them on resume and career successes of those individuals, and not the chemistry of how that team gets along. Now, some of the emotion pieces can play that part, but it's also the self-awareness of what does the team need to be working well together, and be open and honest with the vulnerabilities of the team and you as that leader. Because when you're building the team, all those components have to play a part. 1, who are the right people for you, the leader? And many times it's not the person we like the best in the interview. It's actually the opposite. It's the person that we have nothing in common with in that interview, because they're going to bring something new to how things are going to be done, which will complement instead of overpower, right? So in some of the ways in which you build that team chemistry, a leader should focus on themselves first and know what they need, and then watch how the team works together. And back to your high resumes of success, talented people have to learn how to work with other talented people. We tend to become very good sole contributors of our function, but in a leadership team, whenever a leader is putting together a team that they're going to have some sort of management over, it's about unity. not independence. And that's where sometimes it gets lost. So I call that team chemistry.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. So it's obvious to me, we won't get through all 7 today, but what I love to do is give people a little taste of a couple more. So then they go out and buy the book or the book series to fill in the rest. So we hit insecurity. Where do you feel most drawn to go next? Is there a runner up that you think would be helpful for our time today?
Well, to start off with, our audience should probably understand that they can figure out where theirs are. So I built an index called the HeadTrash Index. I'm very practical and very simple. That's me, practical and simple. So if you wanted to try to figure out the 7 yourself, you go to HeadTrash 911, numeric 911.com. So HeadTrash 911.com. A 10 to 15 minute multiple choice, so easy peasy survey that at the end will deliver to you all 7 a numeric scoring, because a score helps you know metrics of which of the 7 are more impactful to you than the others. And then I pick out your top 2. So you've asked me to give you like my top 2, what I think are most relevant. You now as an individual can go out and find out what your top 2 are. So headtrash911.com. And from the 7, what would I say is something that I would navigate to next? I want to say anger.
Okay.
Selfishly, it's my number 1. But I think anger is misunderstood. So that's why I'd like to describe it so that people could appreciate that I'm not recommending that you're not allowed to get upset. And I'm not recommending that you should never be angry, because we will. So it's almost impossible to actually fulfill that you don't do that.
Well, to your point, anger is energy and anger is passion. And we always say we love people to be passionate. So it's
until it hurts us, and then we don't want that passion,
that's right?
Until it impacts us.
It's that spectrum. So please continue.
Yeah, no. So anger is not always actually the passion. You could be silently angry, which can do a lot more damage, and you didn't say a word. But it's that look. I used to work with a colleague that we would call it the face rub. One face rub when we were talking, he wasn't very happy. 2 face rubs, we had a problem coming. 2 face rubs and then the forehead. Oh my gosh. So they never said a word, but the team knew. The cue was it a double face rub or just a single face rub? Because that's how we knew how upset they were. So anger sounds like it's something visible, which, by the way, it could be. Anger could be tone, voice, but anger could also be passive aggression. And that sometimes is silently deadly. So what is anger? Anger is reacting. Really, in a nutshell, anger is when you cannot control your own emotions at the moment and you react. And I'm a culprit of it. So when it was my number 1, it was a humbling experience because I sat with a group of colleagues because we were having a focus group on my HeadTrash Index. How good is it? So I said, let me get a lot of smart people I trust and see how good is it until I share it with the world. And so we all took it and everyone's going through theirs. And I get to mine. I go, well, I don't think the index works. And people said, why? I said, well, my first is anger. And my husband happened to be in that group. He goes, well, what, you don't think that's your number 1? That's perfect for you. I go, what do you mean? I thought control or arrogance. He goes, no. Your anger to a T. Almost right now, you're getting angry. You're reacting, right? You're ready to throw the whole thing out the window. So anger is the inability for you to actually pause, give yourself a moment, and not react. And that is a moment, that is a form of passion and drive because we want to do something, right? So I want to do something. I get an email I don't like, I want to write back. I have my kids tell me they did something wrong. I want to immediately tell them why they should never do that again. Without a moment to digest the how I want to say it, the when should I be saying it. And there have been many times in my personal life where my husband afterwards said, so you think that was the right time to kind of bring that up? I said, I know, but I had to get off my chest. I go, yeah, but he says, I don't think it came out the way you wanted. So that's what anger is. It's being not able to control your reaction and react. And it doesn't mean I wasn't allowed not to be upset, but it's that moment of, do I need to pause, count to 5? Yes, of course, I probably should have. And the other tip I'll offer is I have something called the invisible zipper, and I use it a lot. And having 2 teenagers, I probably use it at least 3 times a day. My invisible zipper is my need to do something. So I'm never going to change who I am. I'm a very emotional and visible reactor to things. I just am. Sometimes people like that. Sometimes people can feel overwhelmed by it, but that's who I am. How I've learned to not make it hurt me is in the face of my number one head trash, anger. It doesn't compliment if I'm unhappy to also be very visible and very emotional. So how do you manage that? I created the invisible zipper because I know I still have to do something, right? So when I'm upset, it probably starts at the core of my stomach and it's coming up real fast and ready for me to let you know what's happening. And I have to stop that. But how do I stop that if I know I need to do something? So the zipper, which if you ever were in meetings with me, you'll actually physically see me lift my hand up and go like this because I've done something. That something immediately stops me from speaking and reacting. Now, there are days I speak and react with 10 minutes of pause and days I can actually let a whole day go by. I'm getting better at it. But the zipper, my invisible zipper, is used because I know I have to do something. So I'm not going to be able to say, do nothing and count to 5. I won't know how to do that. So it's a nice gesture, but for someone of my sort of DNA, I actually need a physical activity, not to use my voice. And I use the invisible zipper, and it has saved me on multiple occasions from having my foot in my mouth.
So I love that. I love that those tips and those examples. I can totally relate. Because, so here's my question to you. I've noticed that because our workplaces are so high intensity, so high stress, I often find the experience is that time is everyone's most precious resource, not money, it's time. And everything is urgent all the time. Does that make some of the emotions, particularly like anger, more on the surface and more difficult to manage? Because everything just feels so like everything's urgent, everything's intense. So it almost, you almost feel pushed all the time. So I'd be curious to your reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think someone with head trash anger, it's probably magnified, but I don't think it's causing it because someone who doesn't have anger as the head trash, as one of their top few, like it's more on the lower scale, knows to pause because they've saved themselves angst of whatever damage control they'd have to do. So I don't think they view it the same way, but let's use it for folks like me who have it. I do think everything is urgent. But what I've learned in life is if I do something urgently, it's sloppy. And it depends how sloppy do I want something to be. So how I've started to tailor it is, could everything be a magnitude of 20? Or is this not the one I want to really fight for? And that barometer of prioritizing how important is this to me is another way to prioritize. Is it that big of a deal? And that's taught me, and at least in the family life, besides business, because as a consultant, I'm there to help you not get yourself to that. So I'm not there to make you more upset, right? But in my personal world, where I'm in my full control, everything is critical to me. Everything's important, from the college application process we're going through to my daughter off at college that I can't find at all now, where I used to know everywhere she is. How have I not, written that text like, why haven't you called? Because I prioritize, well, wait a second. I could just use Find My Phone to make sure I know she's alive because she's moving. So you come up with alternatives to get that instant gratification you might need about something, but you've learned which ones are priority to act now, because there may be sometimes I have to actually respond quickly. But if I weighed all the ones that actually had a better outcome if I waited even an hour, I don't think I ruined everything pausing that hour.
Fair. Excellent. Okay. So Tish, we have time for one more. Let's do a light touch on one last one. Which one would you pick as kind of our, what's that?
I guess arrogance
or something. Arrogance.
The third to the wheel. Arrogance, because it is a fine line from arrogant confidence to arrogance, not wanting to be around you anymore, like nastiness or narcissist, right? Because you need to have confidence. And I do believe that as leaders, people will follow those that show confidence more than they would that shows that those that don't. So it's kind of hard to know when am I too confident and when is it crossed the line to become arrogant. And one of the techniques I always ask people to do is, who's doing all the talking in the meetings? Are you doing all the talking? Are you making all the decisions? Are you allowing others to have some input? I'm not saying they're all decision makers, but do you allow input into the dialogue? Or do you go in with a already thought out answer and you walk in and you start telling people what we're doing? Because that went from the confidence of maybe you do know better. Maybe you do have the right answer. But if you didn't allow others to engage and interact with an opinion, options, thought processes, brainstorming, discussions, and you walked in and just told people, well, now I know you've crossed the line to unhealthy, because most people don't enjoy being around arrogant people, both professionally or personally. Personally, it's the person at dinner where you could be out socializing and they say, check, please. And you're like, wait a minute, I was thinking dessert. What happened? Why is the dinner over? You know, they make decisions for the whole crowd. That's not fun.
Right.
Or the person you can't invite when you have that person and that person, when you have a person that can only come with a select group of people because they won't damage too much of everybody else. Well, that's what happens with arrogance. You actually get left out. So you really want to pay attention to, when am I using my confidence to be a teacher, to crossing the line to being the arrogant one in the room that nobody wants? Because you know what? Everybody loses then. Your intellect, your knowledge, we don't even want it, because when you share it, it's overwhelming and we don't even want to hear it. So you do need to manage that. And I do think you need to pay attention to it, because we're taught as leaders to be able to have some confidence so people will follow, to be decisive so that we can make decisions to help. But you have to be vulnerable enough to also know that sometimes best decisions come from listening. And arrogant people don't listen well. They talk terrifically, but they don't listen well. So if you find yourself the one talking the most, checkbox, maybe I have a little arrogance.
That's really good.
If you don't let anybody else have any sort of opinions or say to even fathom possibly someone else could be as smart as you in the room, checkbox, that's probably a problem, right? So those are some of the elements that I would look for.
So a couple things hit me while you were talking. First, I think it maybe got to this third one where I could really see some of the patterns and connections that they all interrelate. So when you were talking about arrogance, I could see some relation to even control in some cases, if you're being overly controlling. Or when you're talking about arrogance, I could see some relation to insecurity. Mm-hmm. I know someone recently I was talking to, and he just kept bragging about himself over and over and over again. And it was really because he was deeply insecure, but it showed up as arrogance, as a mask for insecurity. The second thing I thought about as you were talking was, I thought, when we're really healthy in that confidence, and arrogance is a positive thing. We have a level of vulnerability and humility, mm-hmm. and then it often manifests itself in curiosity. We're not afraid to ask questions of others or bring other people in, because we're.
So you hope. So you hope
when we're in a good place with that. So yeah, that was really, really good. So, okay. So Tish, this has been great. We're getting close to the end. I ask all my guests this question as we kind of get to the end. What is one life hack for us? So some kind of tip or trick that can help us either have better relationships or better conversations, healthier conversations, either at work or at home.
My answer would be don't react. Okay. I think when we react, it is not a clear thought process. I think we foster a lot of pain to others besides ourselves. And I think it's so easy to do that it becomes something all of us should work on. So I would say reacting to situations. That would be a tip, is make sure you're thinking before you react. And that's not easy to do, especially if you're emotional about something, which is why I do think your audience might, really want to figure out where their 7 are. So HeadTrash911.com, without a doubt. And you raise something, which I think is terrific, Brandon. It's that HeadTrash cocktail that you mentioned. So in the book and through the actual index, you can find out what your cocktail is, which is the top 2. And many times it's those correlated arrogance with a dab of insecurity, control with a little bit of guilt, because a lot of these intertwine to feed the other, which is why we call it the cocktail. And when you do the index at HeadTrash911.com, you will see which 2 are those cocktails, because we have all 7, but all of them don't impact us all the same at the same time either. So the 2 that could marry to you the most will probably be easy to understand. And if you have anger like me, my tip is do not react.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Tish. Okay, so you've already kind of moved down this last path, but if people want to learn more about you, follow you, get copies of the books for their own, where can they go?
So we started off where, I'm Tish Squillaro, CEO of CANDOR Consulting. I work with leaders of all levels on decision making and producing great outcomes, right? That's the goal. You can find me at my website, which is HeadTrash. Well, they have two websites, candor-consulting.com, because the actual consulting business is called CANDOR. You can also reach me through my HeadTrash, which is the book series, which is at headtrash.com, or go to the index, which is headtrash911.com. I'm easy to find. My email is on my website, both of them. And, I am very good at being on 24/7, which is something a consultant has always learned to do. So if you reach out and have a question, or if you've bought one of the books on Amazon or wanted to buy one direct from me, you can. And really just take a good look at observing and becoming self-aware, because that's the greatest tip I can offer anyone, is if you know enough about you, I promise you will impact others in a much more positive and healthy way.
Tish, this was great. Thank you for your time. And I would encourage folks, we only got through 3. There's 4 more we didn't even get to today. So all the more reason to check out all the resources Tish has given us today. Tish, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights and wisdom. You are a real gift. I really appreciate all the good work you do in the world.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it, Brandon.
I thought that was a great conversation. Tish really had so much to cover. And of course, my intention was, hey, we're going to get through all 7. Well, her examples were so rich and detailed, we really only covered 3. But just as a refresher, she said, basically, there are these 7 emotions that get in our way. And they are control, insecurity, arrogance, paranoia, anger, fear, and guilt. So I pushed Tish a little bit and said, Tish, what are you seeing as the big issue today? She jumped right to insecurity. She said, insecurity is number 1. We're trying to worry about what other people are thinking about us, trying to be other people. She talked about imposter syndrome. She talked about social media and some of the roles even that plays out for us. And then I said, all right, Tish, well, what do we need to do to overcome that? And she gave us a couple things that were really helpful. She said, first, get comfortable with what you're good at and make a list. Really identify what are those key things you're particularly good at and make a list to remind you of those things. Then she said, stop comparing yourselves to others. You are you, focus on you, what you're good at and your strengths. And then finally, learn to accept positive feedback. I know that's such a simple thing, but she really talked about how hard that is for a lot of folks she works with. Just learning to say thank you and stopping there rather than filling in gaps and trying to talk about why it really wasn't good enough. So all great ways we can overcome the insecurity trap. The second one we went in down the path of was anger. We talked about anger. And she really helped define that in a way that I thought was interesting. She said, it's the ability to, when we're angry, we're not controlling our reactions. So we're reacting in an impulsive way, in an emotional way. And sometimes that emotional way is loud and outspoken. Sometimes it's just the way we respond in our facial expressions. But there's clearly a reaction. So she said, we want to really be able to make sure that we're taking that time to step away. And she talked about digesting the how, the when, and what we want to say, not reacting in that moment. So we can really think about the how, the what, the when. And she even talked about using an invisible zipper. That was something that she uses for herself, just to make sure that she doesn't respond in a really strong emotional way. And the last one we talked about today of the 7, we only got to 3, but we talked about arrogance and making sure that, we're walking that line of confident, but we're not stepping over being arrogant. And she said, you've crossed over the line when you're making decisions for everybody. You're not listening to anybody. You're talking about yourself all the time. It really just becomes all about you. So making sure that we're keeping that balance and we're really focusing on being confident. So we're walking with humility and ultimately getting curious about others. And her, of course, big life hack was making sure we don't react. So I would really encourage you to follow our conversation today and go deeper down that path. Check out one, if not multiple books by Tish on HeadTrash. Even take her self-assessment so you can figure out what are those 1 or 2 items that are really sticky for you and how you can overcome those. So ultimately, we can all show up a little bit better in the world as we move into our next year.